as a jam between two talent managers, one slightly from the mainstream skew, Ranimol, while the other has dealt largely with the independent content grid, talent-friendly. Holding this jam together is Orly Ravid, who also brings in the world best practices perspective and a similar line of questioning. So talent management and world best practices, I would like to invite my guests, please. Ranimol, the business head from Times Talent, and Orly Ravid, the founder of the Film Collaborative, and the gentleman out here, Callum Franklin, founder and managing partner at Matter.
Hi everyone. I'm really excited about this panel because I'm going to learn a lot, as well as the audience, hopefully. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So just let's start out with some very fundamentals. Who are you? What do you do that's not already written on the page? In other words, how do the people here in the audience know how you can help them? Let's start with you.
Okay, I don't see too many people here, but whoever, I guess, will benefit from this session, I'm sure. If you're a producer, director, anyone remotely close to making films, you would need talent, right? That's one of the main things anyone looks out for. In our country, especially in India, talent management per se is very, very new. Bigger artists some 10 years ago were handled by secretaries because they only needed to handle their calendar. It's the changing face of cinema and brands and all kinds of things coming in where you needed individuals to manage these actors and their lives. So it's a very, very new industry, and it's not like there are schools or colleges where people are taught or trained to handle artists. And India is very, very different. We spoke about it in the day. People here are very, very different. Our cinema is different. We can't really have the same rules as the West and copy and think that this would be a correct fit. So as we are going along, it's a very evolving process. With world's best practices, we have to also find India's best practices. So I've been into talent management for over 8 years now, and recently joined Times as their talent head. It's a new division which not many people know of. So BCCL, the Benetton Coleman company group, has about 50 companies, and this is a very small division which I head. We are signing up more people eventually, hoping that we will be able to service producers and directors and writers as well. Hopefully someday, not right now.
So now you're focusing, just so I understand, on
talent, actors.
Yeah, front of the screen. I mean,
yes,
front of the camera is what I would say.
Yes, in front of the camera.
Super. Caleb, you.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, Ranimol, Orly, thank you so much, and Nfdc and Anupama, thank you for having us. I come from a long tradition of talent representation. I started at a company called CA, Creative Artists Agency, about, I guess now 13 years ago, and then built that company in India, and now started my own company. And we primarily work with authors, writers, directors, and producers. And I think when you say talent management, it can mean so many things. There are agents who represent chefs, and there's agents who represent speakers, but I think what you'll understand that what we all do is to look at you and look at what you're passionate about and figure out, A, how can we make that a reality, and B, how do we make a ton of money doing it? And I think the commercial creative angle is what we work on. So Ranimol, you guys will primarily work with actors, and we primarily work with what we will say storytellers and stories. And I think you are right, it is in early days still yet for India in terms of talent management, but the world is at our gates, and if it's Apple and YouTube, who was just here, and Netflix, I oftentimes are involved in deal negotiations where the contract is longer than the screenplay. And so if you are a creator and you are thinking about beautiful stories and you're thinking about how to make beautiful work, but you're spending months doing negotiations and going through the contract, well, you probably aren't spending your time correctly. And I feel that talent managers, apart from being the people who source ideas and help you identify opportunities and then negotiate and close those deals on your behalf, really operate as your partner to ensure that you can spend as much of your time creating beautiful things.
I have many, many questions flying. Well, don't worry, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So first of all, in the US, where CAA and those big agencies are based, there's a little bit of a stereotype that you have to sort of first be generating revenue for them to sign you on. And if you want to, if you're a very beginner, you're probably going to need what's called a manager before you get an agent. To what extent are you two working with up-and-coming talent that's not yet bringing home the bacon, as we say in the States, versus like really working with people who are already established?
Lines are very blurred here in India. So agent, manager, they are not very defined as of now. There are very, very few. Every agency has a different module of work. So typically where an agent is supposed to source work in the West, I'm supposing, right? That person is the point, and the manager is dealing with artists. Here, one person does everything. Yeah, so you could be a manager agent, you could be what do you call me? I'm heading, what am I? Agent, manager? But it's a combination of both. So it's not demarcated as of now. I guess eventually there will be those demarcation as more and more people will take this up as a career option. It's not even seen as a career option right now.
You get, if I may drill in just a bit, so do you have a range of clients that are famous and less so?
Yes.
And are you getting them work in combination of films, TV series, commercials?
All kinds of, yeah,
Right.
modeling, print, all kinds of
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, 360, yes.
360, great. Cool.
Finance, I mean, you name it.
Now what about you, sir?
I mean, we are in a special part of the business, which is storytelling. And oftentimes we're chasing great stories. And that can come from a Bansali, and that can come from a young writer or a young story or a young author that you find out about. And in our business, oftentimes our clients who are very big are looking to us to find what are those stories that I should be telling? Who are the writers that we should be working with? We represent 37 writers in India for India projects. And 36 of them are working right now, and I think we're going to close a deal for the 37th to get working. And it's just because there's so much demand for that type of talent right now. And we have writers who would have been an AD or wrote a story concept note. And much of our time is to say, okay, how do we help develop your career so that you're going in the right place, so that a few years down the line, you could be a showrunner on your own series, or you could be writing your own features. And oftentimes that's just making sure that they're in the room for opportunities, because no one is a mega director or a mega producer overnight. This is a long, tenuous career. And so to answer your question directly, yes, we represent the entire Spectre.
Now, here at this Film Bazaar, I actually saw a project that I thought, well, I wouldn't quite know what to do with this film as it exists currently in the US, but I feel like someone could buy the remake rights, and you've seen that happen before. Is that, to get a sense of like how much pitching you're doing of just, I know you're representing actual writers to provide writing services and improving their careers, right? Is there any helping them sell just pitches, or what kind of deals are being done in this space in India? And I'm going to turn to you next.
I think it ranges the gamut. We often like to start with the story, because if you're a writer looking for a writer job, you need a spec script. The person who's going to hire you is going to want to read something that you've done before. And so, yeah, in that case, we'll start with the IP or the idea. All the way up to, we have clients who have existing film ideas, and we help those find finance and things like that. So I hope I'm answering your question, but yeah, no, it really is kind of focused on the story in a lot of ways.
So as a part of what I do, I quit my last agency because I wanted to do packaging of films, because that's lacking in our country. I think in the 90s, I keep talking about it to everyone I know, that in the 90s in Indian films, there was a scope of a credit called project consultant, someone who would, you know, put things together for a film, and it stopped existing, I think.
We have consulting producer now. But
Yeah, so but in India, it's almost diminished. So I thought, why not revive it? And recently, a huge film like Padmavat saw Bimal Parekh, this gentleman who's otherwise a CA, put together things, you know, be the person. And 20 years of working in the media, all I have earned is a foot in every place. I mean, I can open doors, I know, so and have conversations. So that's what I wanted to do. But Mr. Vinny Jain made me an offer and says, "Who's stopping? Do that and this." So I'm trying to bridge the whole thing of trying to put together films, because that's where I will be empowered to maybe also push in casting for my talent, right? I'm sure, see, the West has very demarcated rules and laws. You as a producer cannot be an agent as well. So, which I know because my last agency, that's why they had to come up with another entity for the production house, you know.
I wrote my law review article on the whole act that doesn't allow lawyers or producers and mentors to employment.
Yes, correct. That's exactly what I'm saying. So, coming to here, so I said, okay, there has to be some way of doing this. So, and because we were bombarded with lots of scripts. I read a script a night, literally. So, there are certain things you read and you say, okay, this needs to be seen. This needs to be, you know, someone needs to help this come together. And most writers don't have voice. They don't know. They don't have the what do you call it? They don't know how to go about. I'm sure half the people who come here also come here to find a way to, you know, get into mainstream or get networking contacts to find that particular studio or a person, or let's say come to you. So when I read a script and I see caliber in it, and I know a certain artist who's looking for a story like that, I help bridge that. I've recently put together, and I'm working on 3-4 of them with a small production house called Dar Pictures in India, and some a little unknown production houses as well. So starting there, I hope it goes somewhere.
I'm just so happy to hear that people are reading.
I am reading. I read a lot.
I'm just so surprised, you know, you go into these studios and all the big production companies, and, you know, earlier we would just have to write synopsis of the screenplay or the book, otherwise I'd come in 1 month and I'd hand the book over, and I'd come a year later and the book is still there, totally fresh, hasn't been opened, and I say, "What did you think about the book?" "I loved it." So I'm so happy to hear that. I frankly feel that we're in a crisis of story because we haven't been reading enough, and I do think it's improving. But we'll get there.
And so, just, I mean, first of all, are people, well, you're dealing with talent, so, but in terms of the writing, is this in English, in Hindi, in every language? Like, I'm just to understand who you're actually representing and to whom. You're dealing with just the big American conglomerates, I mean, tell me everything.
I mean, we work with a host of what we like to call buyers. I know that's such a terrible term. If they knew we called them that, they'd be like, "Oh, you guys are terrible." But we think of them as buyers, and a buyer can be a great production company. It could be a studio. It could be a Netflix, an Amazon. It could be an actor who's very interested in telling a type of story and then wants to come to us to get maybe a book or a screenplay. So I guess to answer your question, our primary buyer sets are your traditional studios and increasingly so international conglomerates that are coming in. But you know, you'd be so surprised how many passionate people out there are looking for great stories.
And are they local stories that they want, or not, or kind of more amorphous global stories, or is it a range?
You know, I think what's happening with Narcos and Dark has really kind of gotten rid of this concept of a cross-border. I mean, I remember when I first got into business, people would say, like, "I want an amazing, like, Indo-Chinese African film." And like, how do we put, you know? And then you sit back and you go, like, how do you write that, right? And I think today people are saying, how do I take very, very local stories, do them exceptionally well, and those stories tend to resonate across the world. And so, no, I think they're looking for very local stories, very honest stories, in a world that's becoming increasingly crowded and competitive.
I have to jump in and say something, and then I want to hear more from you. When I was in London this summer, I met with Peta UK. We were talking about Slumdog Millionaire, and when they tested it with Indian audiences, they weren't interested because I guess they lived it and been there, done that. It was kind of, and they were almost going to shelve the project or really like snuff it out. And then if they realized that the Western audience was going to be totally crazy for it, which obviously became a huge hit. But it's very interesting, like that stuck with me. But just to understand more who you're working with and what people are looking for.
Okay, so when I started talent management, things that I used to read was what would come our way. Right, 90% of what comes your way to a successful actor is rubbish. It's so bad. It is so bad, and seriously, it's really bad. You don't even know how to decline it half the time. You just say, oh sorry, my talent is not looking at something like this at the moment. What more do you say? And I know people who know me, like personally also get offended, saying, oh, you don't want this project of mine to, I have nothing personal, it's really bad. So sometimes people are so delusional in our country, especially in India. I feel they have the right to make whatever, and what they have written is the best. Sometimes it doesn't work like that, or maybe the artist you represent does not want to do a certain thing.
Well, how do they? Let me drill into that further, because that seems to really hit on the best practices theme of this panel.
Yes.
And I've had similar conversations with people like, there's sort of a sense of entitlement of like, I get to just make what I want and it should be distributed worldwide without any paying attention to what the marketplace actually is looking for or what is possible. So how do you advise people who are creating that content that you don't feel that there's a fit for?
Okay, so when someone's just starting out, they sort of completely trust you and they take your word. But when someone's come with some bit of experience and every film that they do, they take a lesson and they tie the lesson like really like a knot, and they don't follow anything else anyone else says. But it's each one. How does anyone know what will work or what won't work? But you follow your instinct and gut and you go with it. But which is precisely why, suppose you've done a certain kind of role and then you don't want to continue it. But because it was successful, all you will get is exactly the same kind of story. So that's when when I read, it's so frustrating sometimes, because you're like, okay, this boy has done this, he will not do this again.
Well, it's like Lunchbox is successful, then all of a sudden everyone wants to...
Your success, I'm telling you, half the time, the most powerful person in the room is the actor, especially a successful actor. That's how films get greenlit, sorry, but that's true, right? I mean, they are very powerful. So, which is...
Most of the time, they're the reasons people show up to see a movie.
Yes.
Or a TV show.
Even if it's a reasonable name, it's important to have that person on board, and then everything works. Suddenly, it all falls into place. So recently, when I was putting a film together, I knew that this is a high concept film. This particular actor will really like it. Took it to them. He changed it. He said, "Great, but it's a first-time director. Can I have a strong creative producer?" So I said, "Sure, let's explore." And then I've taken it to a creative producer who was willing and wanting to work with that actor. So therefore, it has all fallen into place. Soon there'll be an announcement of this film. So it's coming together. So small victories, I'm still also learning. I'm not someone who's done it forever or anything, but I know there is a process and it is working. It's purely relationship-led. India, the market, it is.
But do you think you want a representative that is kind of looking ahead? We often talk a lot about what the zeitgeist is, right? And so 5 years ago we said women-led stories are going to be very important. So then how do we begin to start identifying women writers and women-oriented books with strong female protagonists? We said the same thing about VFX and SFX being able to empower retelling of Hindu mythology in a really exciting way. And so how do we now take technology and partner with these beautiful stories that have been around for thousands of years? And I think the role of the agent is to understand, like, when an actor says yes to a film, that film's not going to show up on screens for the next year or two. When you get a book sold, it's going to take a year to write those screenplays. It's going to take 3 months for pre-production. And so you kind of have to look down the barrel and say, where are we going as a culture, as a nation, as a world? And sometimes you make mistakes, but you have to ask that question, because we're not in a business where stuff happens today. I can't base, like there's this thing on Google where you can go and search like what everyone's talking about right now. Like it's the worst thing to write a screenplay about.
Right. It won't be what's...
It's not going to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
We need tomorrow.
Do you have any, we were talking a little bit earlier this morning about IP and legal issues and the differences between the West and India. And I've actually heard a couple of people reference registering with the Writers Guild instead of the Copyright Office, which I thought was a mistake. And, so it's interesting to me as an American lawyer. So do you have any observations about either common mistakes or common good practices, or something sort of to advise people in a way that relates to your work?
So law in India is very complex. There's just so much. So suppose I have a young girl who's just come from a pageant, who's about 17, 18, who's not even an adult as such, and is under contractual foundation. That contract, let's say, doesn't allow her to do a lot of other things. It's too much. We don't come from law backgrounds. Our normal people don't know our own rights. Law is not, no really, I mean, I'm sure everyone in the room will agree. Even I am not sure. Someone who's supposed to read contracts, I get many contracts and close many deals, and whether it is brands or films or producer contracts. Someone who reads contract, I'm telling you, I myself are not sure half the time, and I will definitely need a legal person to say, listen, look at it once. Please wet the draft, literally. So that's because we're not clued in. We're not all lawyers. Even trained lawyers sometimes don't know, really, yeah. Because it's such a specialization of sort, and it's evolving. Like I said, there might be a clause which I have not thought of today, and we face a problem on the set, and therefore it becomes a clause in the next. So it's not a full proof. It's not, yeah.
And but it is becoming increasingly important. And I remember back in the day when we would sell a project in India, we would have this bundle of rights called satellite rights. And they were very valuable, and we were like, whoa, we're making so much money on this. But then we realized they were taking the cable rights, satellite rights, SVOD rights, and then you realize that today, your SVOD rights can be more than your satellite rights.
It was a mistake when people allowed too many rights to go in one bundle.
Totally. And so I feel like, to your point, this is an area where a lot of growth is needed, because it's no longer the industry where everyone knew each other and I could go and say, "Son, please, help me out. I didn't know that this was that." That doesn't happen when you're talking to an Amazon.
No.
You sign that deal, those rights belong to them.
Of course.
And we've got to really get smarter about that. And we could spend an entire day talking about the elements of contracts that are coming in from these foreign companies that are totally turning our business on its
Is there
head.
imposing on you Western law and Western practices? And,
Oh, yeah.
And then you have to...
Right, so Manushi Chillan is our Miss World. She will be passing on her crown next month. I have dealt with her in the past, the reigning time, and she is a Miss World signed on with Miss World Organization UK. Their rules are different. Actually, if you were to see, we abolished Bonded Labour Act in 1975, right? So by law, she's not, they can't fight a case here. You know what I'm trying to say? But they hold on to it like as if, international, whatever, we'll take you and we'll do. So, but you are bullied, what to do? Like, I know of things where I've had to literally explain it to them on an email saying, listen, it doesn't matter. This is important that she does it. It's government of Haryana or whatever. So suppose they just want to bully you and they say, no, we are saying she can't, so she can't, because she's contractually bound. But I'm just saying lame examples, but these are everyday examples. Because she's in contract, which otherwise wouldn't even be valid here. You know my point? So it's really complex when you're dealing with international specialists. I did a endorsement deal with her with a Chinese-based company called Club Factory, which has some 3 partners here. It was such a complex deal to do, my God, you can't imagine. And Miss World wanted to step in because they have an understanding with China. You can't imagine what a nightmare, right?
Some of the things we get in these contracts are so crazy. So we put a writer on a show.
And then that's why the time taken for negotiation. One point, it takes forever.
But there was a clause in the deal which said if the writer shows up to set drunk, they can terminate the contract. Now,
wow, writer turns up drunk.
Who puts that in a contract? And
but in Hollywood, there's a real need to have that in the contract.
So then I turned to my client and I said, well, look, here's the upside. If we want to get out of this deal, let's just go have a drink.
That's very clever. I will say that I see filmmakers making a bunch of mistakes on this front. I don't want to dive too much into legal, except to say it shouldn't be glossed over. You know, people are giving rights away without even realizing it. Remake rights, having too many rights be defined under one category for one price point that's inappropriate, or if it's appropriate now, it might not be in the future. I mean, that happened, where all the digital rights were sort of already, all the VOD stuff was subsumed under either broadcast or home video, and people couldn't get them back when they were finally worth something, and they didn't realize what they'd done. So, all that to say, to be precious about it. Before we turn to the questions from the audience, and I'm sure there's so many, are there any kind of like, either trends that you see happening now that you think is worth mentioning in terms of advising people who might be looking for representation, or just wanting to know how to sort of function in the space right now?
People looking for representation. In our country, successful people don't need representation. Mostly, you know, things are taken care of because they have their own teams working, etc. Basically, what is representation? It is army of people who are keeping you up there, who are working on your image, who are trying to get you all the money on planet Earth, right? Well, because that's how you make your money as an agency. That's what one does, right? So let's take for example someone as successful as a Karan Johar. He doesn't really need management. I'm saying director of that level. It's people who start out, and we are not equipped right now to actually take on such people and represent them. It is a very, very new sort of market and unheard of. So it's their own struggle. They have to figure their way out, etc., till they make one film which is successful, and then it becomes easy. Till the time that nobody knows them, it's just a battle. It's a yeah. So it's a huge battle. Yeah. So that's the ladder I feel, and actually now almost all agencies are looking at good writers, because whether the last agency I worked with, which was Bling, Mr. Atul Kasbekar, who turned producer, also has a wing with developing writers, because they have a slate of films and they're looking at collaborating with good people, new fresh directors. They're giving chances because that man comes from ad background and he knows directors who are working in the ad world. Ultimately, that's your progression, right? Everyone's itching to make a film. So he identifies the right ones who will fit the right script. That's where my learning is coming from, where I see what's working. So yeah, companies like that, my ex-company, even Yashraj, where I used to work earlier, they have writers room, they mentor writers. Jaideep Sahani is a great guy to be mentored by for anybody out there. So stuff like this is happening, which is hopeful. I'm sure future holds much more. I myself want to take on writers, directors, represent them in the next 1 or 2 years. Right now it's too nascent, it's a very new department, still struggling, putting things in place. So yeah, it'll take a while, but hoping.
Gail, before you answer that, actually I want to ask you both another question. You can answer both at once. In terms of brands, because you guys, it's touched on in the explanation of the panel, and you guys touched on it earlier, but are you guys also working with corporate brands and pairing them with content, or pairing content with brands, or can you explain that, and then Gail can answer both questions at the same time?
So, we right now are in a very interesting phase, at least in Indian ad market. Most brands want to spend on digital much more. So they are looking for digital, yeah. So whether it's social media influencers, they are all looking out for different kind of ideas. So when they come to us, because we have so many pageants, Miss Indias, and they all have decent following, so we come up with something more creative. We have a digital wing who gives them some story or give them some different way of putting, and not outright on the face ad. You know, so right now I'll give you an example. There was Diwali, Durga Puja, there's this puja that happens. We had one of our winners who's now gone to Miss World this year, giving a tribute to her mother, because her actual story was that of a single mother having brought her up. She's 19 and she's been funding school dropouts from the past 4 years. So it's quite a tremendous story. And she says that I am what I am because of my mother, just like this mother, and actually the brand, it was a brand integration. But we did it very smartly. So that was a solution we gave, complete from production, from writing to producing it to execution. And also getting in money, because we had some single moms who are from the film fraternity sharing it. So in turn making our commissions from the money that comes in. So all of this is happening, which is all brand led. There are many series that happen because brands want to now not be seen as outright advertisers. So that's the bridge we are gapping, like, you know, in terms of artists, because I need my artists to be seen and get work.
Yeah.
So.
In my world, because we don't represent actors, we're a
Actors.
little bit less brand facing.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But in terms of then, just before we open the question, any sort of trends you're seeing that might guide people in terms of what, getting representation and content creation?
In terms of getting representation, I think the best thing to do is do something great, because we're out there searching for you. And I think a lot of people think it comes from being in a networking session or not. I mean, we just got a tip off that there was a book that was going to be published, it hasn't been published yet, because one of our friends who's an author knew this author. And we got that book before it was published. And we sold that book even before it was published, because it was that good of a story. And there's no amount of networking or having the right connections that can replace being excellent.
What type of genre, may I ask? Like, without giving it away, unless you want to give it away?
Think about Lord of the Rings set in North India.
I knew something big like that.
It's epic. It's awesome. And then in terms of my advice, look, you can do as well from great management, but if you have bad management, it can also really screw you up. And so my advice to people is don't look for a manager or a representative just to have one, because that person is your representative to the world. And if that person doesn't read, doesn't have good taste, is mean in the conference room, it all comes back, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's where this business is sort of evolving to. Less so a gateway, more so an advisor. And I think if you can find someone who truly cares about you, there's nothing better than that.
Yes, and that's great advice, because I actually heard of a manager like downgrading his client in a meeting. That's not what you want. So I guess let's open up for questions, because I'm sure there's going to be a handful of them. Maybe we get a little light on the subject. I see somebody in the very front row with their hand raised. Do you need a mic? Because I can give you mine. Oh, you're about to get one. Here you go.
So, question from the point of view of a producer who wants to hire acting talent or writing talent and has to go through you. You represent your talent, but we pay the bills. How do you deal with that relationship?
So you do not pay me, you pay the artist, and we take the commission from the artist because we manage them. So that's a model. It's not per project. Therefore, it's a win-win for you as well as any other person.
You're just going to pay more because they're represented than you would otherwise, right? She's right. You're not paying her fees.
No, what I'm saying is, if I hire your talent, actor or writer or director, that pays you, correct? So I'm just curious how you navigate relationships with producers who can sometimes be difficult, and most times are looking out for our own sort of
What's in
what
it
we
for
want,
me?
yeah, what's in it for us. But you need to sort of keep on the good side of producers too, so as to keep getting work for your talent. So I'm just curious, when you do have a situation where your talent is pitted against your producer, or a producer is pitted against your talent, how you navigate that in terms of just being a diplomat, in terms of doing conflict resolution, that kind of stuff. That's what I'm curious about.
Typically in India, it's all relationships based. If I have great equation with you, it's very simple. It's as simple as that. But money, like that you're talking about, see, it's not a retainer model of work. Okay, it's not like I'm charging my talent monthly. I'm not, but there are bills, right? If you have me manage you, you have a legal team that you need to pay for. Actually, there are too many people. If you were to, you can't afford it on a monthly basis. So that's why when a commission model works for us, because we have volumes, we have about 80 people we represent right now. And so therefore it makes sense, because each manager, I have about 7 people in my team, obviously we'll grow later. But they therefore are able to give the correct maths and economics there. Certain brands which I know are very big, let's say, if it's an endorsement, I will charge them as well, a certain percent. But that's because we are servicing as well them for the next 2 years. Sometimes we take a mandate. For example, you're Vika Badukun, and he's he's a brand. And I take the brand's mandate because we have great equation, and I say, I'll do the deal for you. I charge you and I charge you. So you might not be my artist at all, but this also is something we do. So it's very complex. Every day there's something new that comes up. In terms of producers, usually there is a casting director in between, because unless you're like the big lead, a lot of my people will perhaps fit into the parallel roles, or those roles, secondary roles, exactly. Then there is a casting director involved. You also go and build your equation with the team. It's usually amicable. I haven't really faced too much of a problem.
And Miriam Joseph is amazing. I have to say that. I'm a big fan. But I actually feel like we are a bit of a balm and a solution for producers more than they know. And I know that we may drive up cost, but if you have an entity that is helping you find a great story, that's helping you find a great writer to empower that story, that's putting a director onto that vision who can execute, that is a humongous benefit to a producer, especially in a world where the demands for content are greater than they've ever been. So I often find that the people we do business with who are producers, oftentimes, yes, they may feel a little bit of a pinch, but that pinch is nothing versus the opportunity. And we all lose if nothing happens. And so I think in terms of managing that relationship correctly, it's about having enough great talent that you're working with, great stories and great actors that you're putting together, so that that producer goes, yeah, maybe I have to pay a little bit more, but ultimately, here's a solution that has so much value to me that it's worth it. And then the last thing I will say is, producers in India do need to pay writers more money.
Yeah,
we are paying so much lip service to, oh, great content, content is the next way of the future. And then when it comes to negotiating what you want to pay a writer, it's pennies, it's pesa. So I'm amazed, and I think perhaps you need a bit of a solution like us to say, actually it's in your best interest that these great writers can have a living, so that they can write.
Here, yeah, for writers, there's no writers guild here.
No writer.
Right, so yeah. Yes.
Hi. Mr. Franklin, thanks for standing up for the writers. My question to you.
Charge you though.
My question is, yes, all of us are here to say, content has to be the hero to drive the films, but in India the scenario is different. We are star-driven right now. My question is, you scout writers and you manage them and all that. But do you have some kind of a mechanism where you give the seed, or you make them assignment kind of and ask them to write something that you people are looking for? It's assignment based. Now, for example, if somebody writes something and comes to you, that's fine, the way it's coming in. But have you got some kind of clients asking you to look for writers to write something that you're looking for, which might be sellable?
That's a good question. On a weekly basis, we get calls from producers, studios, and platforms who say to us, we have this great project. Can you find a writer who would be good for it? So the answer is yes. We actually keep a database of what we call OWAs, open writing assignments. And we track those, and we ensure that the people we're working with are getting into the rooms to meet with those executives to pitch their ideas. Now, do we as an entity or an organization go out and actively commission writers to just write? We don't. But we often funnel great opportunities for writers to write for some of the people that we sell talent and ideas to.
I want to add something here. So I'm also picking up films, regional films. There's this Malayalam film, for example, I picked up. There is a producer who's interested in the film. Now, right now we're scouting for writers. So they're trying to see which world do they want to set in. Should it be UP, should it be Haryana? Depending on which they decide, they are looking at people who have that kind of sensibility and language. You get me? So it has to be a successful someone. There is no chance for a new person here. Let me be very open. Meaning that's what the producer wants, because he's putting in the moolah. He's like, no, I want someone who has a track record here. So that's been the process, at least practically from my end.
Hi, my questions to you. Since you mentioned you work with Dar pictures.
Dar. D-A-R.
Yeah, okay. So I'm based out of Bangalore. So in a scenario where there's a bilingual production that we want to start, like there's a Kannada version and then let's say there's a Hindi version. Now in Bangalore, the talent management is still a very remote word. The concept is hardly there. Now, so let's say in Mumbai, you as in your company would be handling everything that is needed to ensure the project takes off. And from here, local talent, the Bangalore has to come and work there. Can that coexist, firstly? And secondly, would your company be open to having a producer from Bangalore to take care of his, that side of production and where you would be doing the rest of it? I mean, can a scenario like that exist?
There are some odd cases like this which has happened in the past also. If you were to look up, there are South Indian directors who've come and made successful films here, and similarly, like some South Indian big producers have come. Bilingual, trilingual, I have my own reservations. I feel certain things which work in a certain language, because of that area and the culture, need not work as it is adapted. You have to adapt, you have to make changes. I'll give you an example. There's the movie that released in Hindi, which was Shubh Mangal Savdhan. If you were to watch the original, Kalyan Samayal Sadha, which was completely different. If you were to see the two worlds, they've just probably taken the plot point, but they are very different. It's the writing, it's everything. So was it a formula there where the South Indian producer came and made it in the North, or how did it work? I don't know the formula. I don't know what really happened, but this happens. There are some filmmakers who are putting in, where there is two different languages, they are trying to collaborate with the right people. Again, sensibilities, if it matches, why not?
But
We have time for one more? Yeah, one more. Last question, going to that person.
Hi guys, it's always a delight to see Rani there, and with such honesty and open mind, you're telling us all these things. One question for both of you. For Rani, after coming to Times from wherever all the agencies you came from, what's the extra edge that you can bring to producers like us or all of us in getting the talent together? How different it is from your earlier stuff?
I'll shamelessly pitch. So Times is the biggest, largest group out there. We give you publicity for your film. I think there's a lot of money that goes into public P&A, right? So by virtue of taking my talent, I can assure you that there'll be a lot of social media support and a few articles, if not more, which would have cost you otherwise. That's the biggest support I think any producer can get, isn't it? So.
Great. And a quick question for Caleb. Can you run us through a real example of something that you put together recently?
I was going to ask him that too, and then I thought maybe you'd put him on the spot. I'm glad you did
I
that.
mean, if you're okay with Thanks.
So we have a writer client who I love, whose name is Sunitar Porvala. She wrote Mississippi Masala, The Namesake. And she came into our office with a story of two boys in the Mumbai slums, and that she was interested in making potentially a movie, but had no idea what to do. In that scenario, our team went to the boys' house. We met the parents, we had dinner, we structured the life rights agreement. We then put together the deal. We packaged that with Sid Roy Kapoor Films. And you'll hear an announcement soon about Ballet Boys, which is coming out. But once again, from the concept of the idea with a powerful piece of talent who we love, and then ensuring that all the right things happen down the way to bring it to fruition. So that was a recent one we did.
Did those poor boys get money for their life rights? You don't have to answer that. But I want to know later. Anyway, thank you both so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, Rani, and thank you, Orly, for this lovely session.